All right, so we're very lucky here today to have a couple of gentlemen from CISA and the Department of Homeland Security. CISA is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Am I saying that right? We have Michael Kowal. Michael is a protective security advisor for the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency within the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Region 1 and the state of Connecticut. Before coming to CISA, Michael retired from the Connecticut State Police and spent the majority of his career working within counterterrorism and intelligence programs. Michael has also had over 26 years of military service and is currently a credentialed special agent for the Department of the Air Force, Office of Special Investigations, and is currently assigned as the Reserve Special Agent in charge for a critical counterintelligence location in the U.S. That's pretty impressive. I don't know a lot about all those credentials, but they sound official. We also are lucky enough to have Abad Cabassa. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Abad serves as the Cybersecurity Advisor for Connecticut Region 1 at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, where he assists in developing comprehensive security programs and provides resources from CISA to minimize risk on matters of homeland security and emergency management. Before his time with CISA, Mr. Cabassa was an information system security professional for the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency servicing Connecticut and Rhode Island. For anybody remaining that might still be standing up and talking, if we could please at least slow down those conversations so these gentlemen can talk, that would be great. So with no further ado, we have Michael and Abad. I'm sorry. You just have to follow that.
Oh, all right. So special announcement. In the back, you have poop emoji squeezies. Somebody was asking me about them. They didn't see them. They were wondering if it was my stress ball for coming and speaking with you. And I figured in this room I can say poop, right? Is that all right? All right. So I'm going to put this here, but they are in the back. They're fantastic. All right. So thank you very much for having us today. We're with the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency with DHS, which is just over 5 years old right now. Myself and Abad serve in the state of Connecticut. I've been on since August, but I know we went over some of my credentials and stuff like that, but I started last August after I got poached from a Fortune 4 company working with them, and Abad just came from DCSA. So while we're fresh on the scene for DHS, we're certainly not fresh to helping out stakeholders with security and resiliency matters. So again, it's a little over 5 years old, just to go over CISA. It replaced NPPD back in the day, and there was one individual assigned here back then who would run around and try to build resiliency with the stakeholders out there. Now we actually have 4 running around. So our goal is to defend today, secure, resilient infrastructure for the American people, and then lead the national effort to understand, manage, and reduce risk to cyber or physical infrastructure. And these are the sectors that we cover down on. If you notice, wastewater is there. EPA covers down on that as well. We work with them in partnership. To mention a number of different areas, I want to just highlight some of the matters today that we're covering, which is cybersecurity. This is a big emphasis right now for DHS, obviously, to go out there and build resiliency. The infrastructure security side, where we deal with physical infrastructure throughout all those 16 critical infrastructure sectors that you saw there, specifically talking about wastewater today. The big focus is looking at target-rich environments, but they're resource poor, meaning they don't have the funding to be able to build up like some of the bigger entities. Who here in this room has an endless amount of budget for security matters and cyber matters? Yeah, I thought so. Also, the big thing, like what we're doing right here, the big focus is also stakeholder engagement. We do these kinds of events, number one, to bring an understanding as to what the threat is and where you can go to get the free resources from the federal government. I think that's really important, to understand that you're not alone when you're trying to do these things and build security and resiliency into your operations. We're broken up into a number of regions across the country. We follow FEMA Region 1 here in the Northeast, in the New England area. Again, we have 4 people assigned here in the state of Connecticut. There are 2 protective security advisors and 2 cybersecurity advisors. While we have kind of separate missions, we do work together in a convergence manner. Obviously, there's a nexus now between the things that are happening on the cyber side and the things that happen on the physical side. There are certainly physical ramifications to cyber events as we're seeing today. Plus, everything is getting connected. I mean, there's refrigerators getting connected now. I mean, who doesn't have something that's connected to the internet nowadays, right? So who's familiar with the threats to the water and wastewater environment? Here, anybody? So why don't we call out some of the threats? Yeah, I saw some eager hands over here. What are some of the threats that you're seeing? Okay. Who do you think are doing the hacking? No. Predominantly. Foreign agents, I heard? That's good. I like the interaction here. Who else? Anybody? With Cheetos covered all over them, right? That's what we picture. Yeah, no, so there used to be this thing where we look at nation-state actors, right? That's what we typically focused on. We were always concerned about nation-state actors compromising our systems from afar. You know, you're China, you're Russia, you're Iran, you're North Korea. We're concerned about those entities. But today, have we not seen with ransomware as a service, we're now seeing people truly in their basement, if you have some Bitcoin, can purchase that service now as a cyber criminal or a cyber terrorist and making impacts to these critical infrastructures. So one of the biggest things that came out was we know that these nation-state actors are targeting wastewater and water specifically. It has been made a director priority, and that's why we're out here today to kind of share some of the information that has come out, that we know that Russian hacktivists are targeting water systems and wastewater systems. We've had briefings where we've seen live video of OT systems and the interface hacked because they were internet facing. And you could see the mouse moving and they were changing water levels and pressure levels in the system, and it was pretty scary stuff. And meanwhile, the operator there couldn't stop it. So again here, 2024 to date activity. In early 2024, the authoring organization observed pro-Russia hacktivists targeting vulnerable industrial control systems in North America and Europe. CISA and the FBI have responded to several US-based victims who experienced limited physical disruptions and unauthorized user remotely manipulating human-machine interfaces. Specifically, pro-Russia hacktivists manipulated HMIs, causing water pumps and blower equipment to exceed their normal operating parameters. In each case, the hacktivists maxed out set points, altered other settings, turned off alarm machine mechanisms, and changed administrative passwords to lock out the operators. Some victims experienced minor tank overflow events. However, most victims reverted to manual controls in the immediate aftermath, quickly restoring operations. So the threat is real to both water and wastewater. Some of the actions they recommend to take today is immediately changing all default passwords on your OT devices, which on the cyber side, Abad will go over with you. But again, there's been a number of instances observed since 2022, which is why the FBI director and our director spoke in front of Congress about this threat from China and Russia. And the fact that it's out there now in the wild and in the open is very big. If you can just imagine, if the government is speaking openly about these threats, how long do you think has it been going on behind the scenes in a classified environment, right? So we've known about this stuff for a long time. I don't think I have to speak. Who's here a cyber expert here and deals with the OT technology within, or who's management? I know some management here, right? I think there's limited operators. Either way, here are some examples of some operational technology. Do you want to speak to a couple of these? Go ahead.
So I'm probably preaching to the choir here on what these things actually are. I'm sure a lot of you that are out there in the field understand these technologies better than I do. But we definitely want to highlight that these are the areas that are of concern when it comes to securing these things from a cybersecurity perspective. So I'll be going over a bunch of different cyber-related items here. Just keep in mind that the focus is going to be on the OT environment, but there's a huge respect for your IT environment. So OT, operational technology, IT, information technology. So the IT side would be your traditional email systems, your web shares, your internet access and whatnot, where the OT would focus on those closed systems that are managing your water systems. All right. So what we're looking to accomplish from a cybersecurity perspective is to ensure that you're following some cybersecurity best practices out there. So I talked about IT and OT. The big focus is to make sure that there's separation between the two, because when we talk about the OT environment being exposed to the internet, that's not what you want your OT environment to mirror. We understand that there's many situations where you would want the two to talk together, so we want to do that in the best safe way, right? So CISA has tons of resources, and I have the ability to work with you on a case-by-case basis to go over some of what you got going on and prescribe some best practices. All right, so more on the threats. We're full of threats today, so don't mind us. So as you see there, we had a couple of articles that were published just recently. The Biden administration has a initiative here, issued a letter out to all the states, getting us to focus on cybersecurity within our water and wastewater sector.
Can I just touch on that real quick?
Go ahead.
You're like, go ahead, take it over. All right, so what I want to point out here is just if we think about China right now and what's going on in that region, what are the things that they're very interested in right now that we're concerned about? Maybe Taiwan, right? South China Sea, there's some contention there. There's going to come a time where maybe they say one day the South China Sea is ours, it's a major shipping lane, and then we may try to go react, or maybe tomorrow they say, you know what, I'm taking Taiwan, and then we're going to start sending carriers, or we're going to try to put a force out there militarily to try to prevent them from doing that. So what do you think China's trying to do here at home? If they can affect our lifelines, the things that affect the people, and turn them off, it may prevent us from being able to push our military might somewhere else to influence that region. So that's why when we start to look at lifelines, we look at the criticality of water and wastewater systems, specifically our electrical grid, our healthcare systems, right? To make sure that they're resilient, to make sure that we have security built around them. And you saw in the previous slide where it showed that schematic, I know we're talking about a lot of cyber, but we also have to think about the physical ramifications as well. Because there are a lot of different things surrounding your facilities that, sorry, that's only $10. So there's a lot of things surrounding your facilities from a physical infrastructure and physical security focus, that even if you have the best cybersecurity in the world, if somebody can walk onto your property because you don't shut the main gate, or you don't shut and lock and alarm your main control pump room where your SCADA systems are, or you move the mouse and it's wide open, then it really doesn't mean anything. When they're sending actors over the border, you know, how many thousands at a time we're seeing? We don't know who's here. We don't know what they're planning, and they're entrenching themselves in the community. This notion that I'm a small entity, they're not going to target us doesn't work anymore. We've seen very small businesses that have been targeted by ransomware attacks, right? And even on the physical security side, we've seen attacks happen at churches and large areas. So the attacks can happen all around, no matter how big or how small you are. These are some of the top 10 cybersecurity issues that are out there. I know, Bob, you're going to touch on these in a little bit. These are some other threats and vulnerabilities in the operational technology environment that they're starting to see. Let's just skim over some of those. But the big question here is, if something like that happens to you and your operators come back and say somebody's in the system and they're changing parameters within the system, can you shut it down and go manually? What we're seeing is that a lot of those older engineers that have been around that could do things manually are now retired and gone. And companies have invested in operational technology to what? Reduce manpower and headcount to save money? So are those protocols put in place? And do you exercise those protocols? So those are the biggest things that we want to emphasize. These are fantastic opportunities to put together some sort of security roundtable and talk about cyber and physical security issues and tabletop some of those issues, whether it's a catastrophic weather event that knocks out power and now all your OT systems are down and even your generators down. Maybe your generator's down because Colonial Pipeline happened again and you just can't get fuel because there's no direct feed. But somehow you've lost your systems. Can you go back manually in some capacity? So now that I've scared everybody, all right, we're here to just make you understand, allow you to understand what the emerging threats are and why DHS and the federal government find this as a focus area and an interest, and it's so important for all of us to focus on here in the state of Connecticut. There are services that you can lean on us for. As CISA representatives, as your PSA and CSAs, we are stationed here. We live here in the state of Connecticut. As you heard earlier, I retired from the Connecticut State Police, so I've been here for a long time, and I've worked with a lot of stakeholders over the years. And the big thing here is that we are truly here to help. And Jeff can attest to that. We're actually going to his facility. We're going to be doing a walk around. We're doing a convergence assessment there where Abad and myself will be going in, looking at both the cyber infrastructure and the physical infrastructure, and making recommendations to town leadership to hopefully prioritize funding or enable the application of grants and get funding in that way to kind of build more security and more resiliency. So there's a number of different assessments that we do. I'm not going to go into all of them in great detail, but we start with the SAFE assessment, which is fantastic. It's a quick way to get in there and assess what is going on at that particular moment in time and give you a snapshot of the things you're doing right and the things that could be improved, and giving you options for consideration to make those improvements. We have assist visits where we just simply sit down or have a conversation, which we've done many times with a number of organizations here throughout the state of Connecticut, where we just talk about issues and just build a little bit of trust before you allow us the opportunity to come in and partner with you and bring some of these free resources. We don't impose ourselves on you. There's no regulatory effect on DHS. We have no regulatory side to us. So when we come in, it's absolutely it's trustworthy and between us. When the reports actually, they get printed out and they get produced, these reports are only provided to you. We don't provide them to anybody else, okay? And there's protections there that prevent other agencies from even requesting them, and that's important. The SAFE tool, like I said, is the quickest way to get something, and it's the biggest bang for your buck right off the bat. We can get you something in your hands usually in a couple days. It covers a whole bunch of different items. The infrastructure survey tool is a much larger event. It probably could take up to a couple days. It's a huge question set. The big thing with the IST is you're gonna get comparable data against like systems across the nation. So you're gonna see where you fare, where your systems fare against other ones across the country. And they cover a whole bunch of things like physical security, security force. And finally, we have the IVP, which is a fantastic opportunity. We've been doing this. It's heavily reliant on camera and video collection, but what it does is it produces a fantastic program that allows you to be able to go in and look at specific critical points within your facility and a snapshot in that time and a 360 view, and also provides video. Allows you to be able to plan, sit down and tabletop with law enforcement. You can give them this information so they know where to go and what you're talking about when you go and brief them about the sites, because frankly, a lot of times law enforcement may not have been there unless they've been called for a specific reason. So if there's something that's going on there, fire or law enforcement, this may be the first time you're bringing them here to kind of take a look at the site. These are common physical vulnerabilities that we're seeing, and we are seeing gates that are unlocked. We are seeing pump houses that are unlocked. We are seeing computers that are wide open and SCADA racks wide open. So these are things that we are seeing. One of the biggest things that I didn't mention that's very, very difficult is when you're producing a lot of these documents from business continuity plans, emergency action plans, your security plans, some of the biggest things, and I think all of you can agree, some of the biggest things to change and the hardest things to change is human behavior, convenience, right? We don't want to be inconvenienced. But if you think about it, you put it in a perspective of your own home, what are the things that you do for your own home to keep yourself protected and resilient? And you would probably believe that most of you, I hope, lock your front door, have passwords on your internet. I hope your phones that you have in your pocket have passwords, right? I mean, we're pretty good about those things, but then all of a sudden we come to work and you start to see some pushback. We come in this center all the time. We don't need to put a password on it. And those are things that are really difficult to change over time, but they can be changed. So I'm going to hand it over to Abad to talk about the cybersecurity services that CISA also provides. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I do just want to touch on a point that Mike talked about being able to go manual as well. There actually has been reports in the media that we're talking about Europe countries not being able to go back to manual because of that talent that is retired, and they actually had to recall back a number of individuals to go manual after a cyber incident. While that sounds good from a retirement perspective, if you're looking to get some extra bucks, it's not good for the general public, right? So on the cybersecurity side, we have similar to what Mike was speaking about, hit the assessments. They're confidential. What we go through, we produce a report, it's yours. You do with it as you please. I can assist you with speaking to management on these items and help you prioritize what you should be doing first. So we have a bunch of cybersecurity related assessments as well. We like to start with the cyber performance goals assessment because it is quick. It's usually around maybe a 2-hour type of assessment, question-based, interview-based. We could sit at a table, don't even need to pop open a computer to do that assessment, and usually get you your report back the next day, depending on our workload. And as we mature there, we can look at some other assessments as well, specifically the CRR and EDM that can speak more to your external dependencies, right? So when we talk about building resilience, a big item in that's typically not addressed is your reliance on some third parties. So we want to always keep that in the conversation as well. Keep in mind that you're only as good as your weakest link, right? So during that cyber performance goals assessment, we will touch on some of those items, but not as in depth as some of the other assessments. It's just a quick example of what one of those reports look like, and forgive me, I believe there's quite a bit of a mix of the audience type in here, so I'm going to try to keep it both high level and low level at the same time, just to hit all the touch points here. But all of CISA's cybersecurity resources ties back to the NIST framework, the NIST cybersecurity framework, which is pretty much industry standard at this point. And the reason why we do that is because we want to make sure that if you already have some type of cybersecurity program that follows this within your organization, our results can plug into that. So it's not just two different competing documents or initiatives to get that dollar, right? So essentially what we're after is helping you spend that dollar that you have, because we realize that resources are limited. So we're going to want to help you prioritize where you put your cybersecurity dollars. So now, one of the free services that we offer that usually is quite a bit of an eye-opener to people in the cybersecurity field, that CISA is offering this for free. I stress this tool because there's much more behind it, but this is a very easy one to visualize. So this goes for your IT networks and your OT networks. CISA provides a cyber hygiene scanning service. What this does is scans your perimeter network, so your firewalls, your routers at your perimeter, and you'll get a report every week that speaks to the vulnerabilities that exist on that. So your open ports and what's not patched or whatnot on your perimeter. Very important, because if we can see it easily from just scanning, all the bad guys can see this, right? So ultimately, once they scan, they got a playbook on how to attack your systems. It's not that difficult when you find a vulnerability. The vulnerability is usually coupled with enough information that details how to exploit that system. And in the cybersecurity world, it only takes that entry point. At that point, there's tons of other techniques to gain access laterally to other systems, to escalate their privilege and move elsewhere within your environment. And just on that note as well, I want to speak to the adversaries that we talked about earlier, China and Russia. We recognize that a lot of the techniques that they're using is something called living off the land techniques. They're essentially trying to get in your network undetected and then use the tools that are already in that system to either hide or to gain some type of persistent access to your system. What this looks like here, we're talking about a threat that you may not realize today, but as we were talking about earlier, Mike was talking about earlier about that big picture, the what ifs, such as the shipping lane and whatnot. We believe that it may come a point in time that we're faced with a foreign country telling us, hey, listen, we have access to all this, and we're about to hit that button unless you do this for us. So we're trying to avoid that really, really bad scenario. Now, I believe I'm going to be accurate in this statement that maybe at least half of you in this room, your email addresses from your corporate environment do not end in .gov. Now, while I know it's pretty difficult to change email addresses, I will stress the fact that it's really important to entertain this idea, right? So DHS manages the domain registration for all .gov addresses. So that comes with a certain trust level, and that's what we're trying to build. When you're working with each other or you're working with outside entities, we want that trust aspect to be there when they see that email address come in from a .gov, because we're recognizing there's tons of phishing attempts here. I'm sure everybody in the room has seen bogus emails come in from something that looks really close to an email domain that you would receive an email from, but it actually isn't the right domain. And sometimes we don't really dig into every message. We can hit that wrong link, and that's all it takes for a threat actor to get into our networks. So I stress the importance of this, and keep in mind, if I recognize I'm speaking to different level audiences, so feel free to pass this information along to anybody in your organization that this may be applicable to. Come grab a business card from me as well. I can also email you this entire slideshow presentation, which I believe it's going to be made available in a couple of weeks anyway. So now, on the interest of saving you guys time, CISA develops tons of resources to either pass out to users, post up on your wall, stuff like that, or even documentation-based items to help you save time, focus on your day-to-day job, and leave the tedious tasks to CISA to allow you to steal from our website and working with me to gain access to these resources as well. So what we see here is just a document that speaks to the industrial control systems best practices, which is applicable to all your wastewater systems here. The other thing we have, and this is because we recognize there's a big lack of big lack of incident response plans in the organizations when it comes to cybersecurity. So CISA developed a playbook, as you can see in here in the screen grab. This is a flow chart. I can tell you from my experience while I was writing incident response plans, if I had to draw this flow chart, it would take me maybe at least a day, just because I'm bad with this stuff. I can type all day, but when it comes to graphical stuff, I'm horrible. So I say this because if you're in charge of writing any plans, utilize our stuff. Copy, paste it, save yourself some time. And I can also help you write your incident response plans. If you have anything in draft, or even if you think it's finalized, you can send it over to me, and confidentially I'll go over with you some touch points that you can maybe improve on. So going back to that resilience aspect with the third-party suppliers, CISA has an initiative called our Secure by Design, Secure by Default. So now we realize, talking about the purchasing aspect in here, so hopefully I got some purchasing people in here, or people that are making decisions on where money's spent. So CISA recognized that our vendors and our providers are not really taking cybersecurity into account in the development of their products. So now this cascades down, because when you're going to purchase things, right? So these products that are not taking cybersecurity into account are really cheap. So typically in the purchasing world, especially in the government side, you're going to go towards the lowest bidder. But what we're hoping is that you're taking cybersecurity into account as well. So what CISA did is our Secure by Design aspect of this, where we provide templates and frameworks for vendors, third-party suppliers, to be able to build cybersecurity into their framework in an easy-to-manage way, hopefully not too costly, so that way they can still keep the price down. But the Secure by Default aspect of that is an initiative by CISA to train everyone on the consumer end to purchase cybersecure products, to ask their vendors the right questions. So that way you're ensuring that they're taking cybersecurity into account. You're not left with obtaining products that you have to put all these Band-Aids on and waste more time and essentially more money in the long run and introduce unnecessary risk. So what that looks like on that end, we have a great document. It's one of my favorite documents that CISA published. It's a series of questions that outline what to ask your vendors when it comes to their cybersecurity programs. These questions can also be easily tweaked into contract language if you're ever interested in trying to figure out the right words to include in your contracts with these third-party suppliers to ensure that they're cyber secure and they're going to report on cyber incidents in a timely manner. This is the document to go after. I just want to mention some additional resources that's at your disposal as well. MS-ISAC is a really great working group. I had the privilege of speaking with an MS-ISAC member yesterday. Tons of great resources on that end. A lot of it does overlap with what CISA has to offer, but they also have some different things. Now, one of the biggest things that they have that CISA doesn't currently have is a security operations center. If you ever are unfortunate enough to have an incident and you're wondering what to do, you can reach out to myself or an MS-ISAC member. We can start to guide you through that process. Hopefully, we did a lot of preparation work so that way you know what to do in the time of an incident. But MS-ISAC is a great resource to get them involved. You can feed them some data. They can correlate that against information that they've obtained previously to identify who the potential threat actor is and where they have actually gone in your network and what they're actually trying to do. Hopefully, we don't get to that event, though. I'm going to geek out on a few tools here, so forgive me. Hopefully, this is meaningful to everybody in the room, but again, if not, put me in contact with the right person that we can start to geek over some of these things. So this is more applicable to the IT, typical network side of the house. So we have a Scuba tool. What this is, if you're all familiar with cloud apps, right? So the industry standard now is Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace. CISA recognized that a lot of people are migrating to these technologies and not really taking into account what cybersecurity in the cloud looks like. So there's tons of configuration items in these cloud platforms. What the Scuba tool allows you to do is to take a capture of what those configurations are and compare it against what CISA's best practices are. You'll get a report that looks like this that spits out things that you should take into consideration. So again, we're a non-regulatory business. We're just allowing you to look at these things and make business calls on some of the items that we're finding for you. Another really cool free tool that we have is a malware scanner. So if you ever ended up with an email or a file link that you thought was maybe suspicious or just wasn't sure, CISA has this free resource that you can upload that file or that link to, and you'll get a report spit out. In my experience, it's a couple of minutes, how long it takes. And you'll get real useful information on what that file is trying to do. So if that file was trying to perform a ransomware attack on your system, you're going to get that information. If it was trying to change the level of permission the user account currently logged in has, you're going to see that as well. If it was trying to escape and go to other computers, this is going to tell you. I'm also providing a free link to all our free tools and resources if you want to browse around. I do ask that if you have any specific needs, come and talk to me. I'll be able to find something for you. Even if it's not a CISA tool, if it's a third-party tool that's free, I can usually recommend that. I'm just going to touch on some of the training that we offer as well. Of course, free of charge. That's the buzzword of today. So CISA offers some free incident response training. Again, we recognize that these incident response plans, if they're existing, they haven't got the dusted off of them in some time. We ask to take into consideration these free trainings, really useful stuff. I can tell you that the training, from firsthand experience, it touches all different levels of expertise. Some of these trainings, including the incident response training 101 that I've taken something out of, and I've been in the incident response game for quite a while. It's definitely low level and high level all built in. More applicable to your group here is the industrial control systems training. So I really like this because the way it's structured, it really does go from that 101 to those 400 level courses that you see there on the screen. So I like to think that it's important to understand that all the users that are operating this critical infrastructure systems are having some type of annual training requirements. Typically what we're seeing is that it's too generalized to IT networks in itself. This is a great resource if you want to have a requirement. Not that everybody likes more mandatory training. I promise it's not that bad. When they say 4 hours, it really is just 4 hours. So this training is going to allow you to understand the basic concepts when it comes to cybersecurity best practices in the OT network. It'll open up quite a bit of eyes. I think after taking that training, it really speaks well to a lot of the things that Mike and I was covering today on the threats that exist. The other thing that we can do for you is explore some opportunities where tabletop exercises can benefit your organization. So we talked about all these different scenarios that can happen. We got to practice them, right? So you got that incident response plan, you got policies, procedures, you got a lot of information in people's brains. We want to get that all out. So if you work with one of us, we can go through different scenarios. You can see there we got cybersecurity scenarios and physical security scenarios that we can go through. Essentially what we're looking for is just to make sure that your plans are tried, tested, and true. I can tell you firsthand experience, I've never had a tabletop exercise that we didn't take something out of. So keep that in mind, please. And with that, I'm going to leave our contact information on the page here. As Mike spoke, there's 4 of us here in Connecticut. More than happy to help. We're a non-regulatory body. When we work with you, that information is going to stay between us. And we're just essentially here to help. I know you don't hear that from many federal agencies, but we are one. And I'll check see if Mike has anything to cover as well.
So do we scare you? You guys all right? I know we're like, I think lunch is next, right, Jeff? We got some time. So I want to open it up for all of you. Do you have questions for us while we're here? So I think we have a little bit of time.
My question is about the RTU units that you mentioned, because they use radio telemetry and they are connected to the SCADA's systems that we operate. And the technology for most of the room is at least 10 years or older for these units. So that was an immediate concern for me when I heard you talking about it.
Great point, thank you. So specifically when it comes to the RTU and those wireless technologies, CISA is identifying that there is some issues there when it comes to a resilience aspect. There's tons of information, and Mike may have more on this side of the house when it comes to the threats that exist in the wireless sector, probably more specifically to like 4G, 5G. We've identified that we're just relying on it too much, right? The technology is great for backups, but it's really not good for primary means of contact. But we realize that in some cases it has to be your only way. And that's why we stress the importance on going manual, right? You gotta have the ability to, if you have a great big reservoir, but you got that remote sensor somewhere, maybe you need a boat sticking around if you don't have it already to go out and start taking some manual readings and whatnot. You gotta practice these things. But let's see here. I was gonna touch on another point. I'm drawing a blank on that right now. My apologies. Yeah. Any other questions? I hope I answered your question.
Well, sort of, but again, what the RTUs do is they're constantly, like the PLCs run the equipment. The SCADA just monitors it. So the RTUs, like if they have a power disruption, the RTUs might shut down, but the PLC will keep running the equipment even if it's not communicating with the SCADA. But again, like remember that movie Heat? That was a great movie where the guy was stealing money. He's like, it's in the air. It's in the air. That's the analogy I'm giving you with the RTUs, is that information, the access is there in going between the buildings on the side of the plant. So if someone was nearby and they said, like, cars, they can just tap in through that way, even though the SCADA is not connected to the building.
Definitely. Yeah, so that's the other point I wanted to talk about. Thank you for the memory jogger there. Connected to the internet. So I will say this, when it comes to cybersecurity, the terms connected to the internet, that line is very blurred because of things like that, right? So even though you can consider yourself air gapped, but if you're using the air, you're not air gapped necessarily as well.
All right.
I'll try to speak loudly. Yeah, so what we're recognizing is that there isn't enough attention being paid to items such as you brought up. So the importance is to understand that while you may consider yourself safe because you're isolated or not internet connected, the reality is that you still should be patching. You probably still have vendors come in from time to time and plug in equipment. There's, I shouldn't say a better chance than not, but it's likely that those connections, that USB device, that vendor laptop, potentially is victim to something as well. So I don't know if any of you guys heard of the Stuxnet virus long ago. This talks back to the Iranian centrifuges that was essentially destroyed by a virus. Their system was not internet connected. And it ended up being a virus that was made specifically to target that environment. It was deployed onto USB devices. Nobody knew they had that virus. If you owned a USB drive during that time, you likely had the virus on your USB stick, but it didn't impact you guys because it wasn't designed to target you. So we got to keep that in mind. Our adversaries that we're dealing with, China and Russia, they have that same mindset. This is already a technique that's been tested and it's been proven effective. So something as simple as that is an entry point when you talk about not internet connected systems. So we want to make sure that we're focused on that as well. When it comes to the wireless technologies, I can tell you that we do have an additional resource. I think it was on that slide. It was on one of our slides. We have an emergency communications coordinator that could probably help in that area as well, that I could put you directly in touch with, that deals with different technology techniques and redundancies and all that good stuff. Thank you. Any other questions?
There's somebody way in the far end. Yes, sir. Man in a green shirt.
Where do you see AI being helpful to you, but also being part of your toolbox on the other side, trying to get it out?
If you got something, I can start on that.
Go ahead.
Very, very interesting topic. Great question. Put me on the spot with that one. But I'll start with saying that when it comes to AI, it's something that's we're gonna have to live with, right? There's nothing debating that at this point. It's gonna be introduced to our environments and our technologies. So yes, our adversaries are trying to utilize AI to their advantage, and we're also trying to utilize it to our advantage as well. Keep in mind, introducing AI to an environment itself where you think it may be helping, it could be enabling a threat actor as well. The most important thing to stress on is to develop some type of policies and procedures around AI. I get asked the question often, where do I start when it comes to AI and cybersecurity? Number one is just get some type of policy out there. At the very least, it's important to understand what your users are using in your environment. So that way you can start to get some good information on how to protect yourself from the threats that exist within those different platforms. One of the most important things to include in that policy and best practices overall is to continuously sanitize the information that you're putting out there. And it's not because we got information today that says these AI platforms have been compromised or used for bad reasons. It's because we believe that there will be a time that that happens. So we got to be mindful of what we're allowing this AI to gather when it comes to information. If we're giving it proprietary information, industry secrets, and whatnot, we're just giving all the keys to the castle away for somebody to just hack into that system at once and instantly have all that information at their disposal.
He brought up a great point. AI needs data to be successful, right? That's the only way. I mean, if you think about implementing it in healthcare, well, if you're going to have a doctor that's going to be it needs to comb through tons of data to be able to correlate all that stuff and come up with some sort of answer for you. It means access into those data streams. So if you're going to implement AI in some capacity, you're giving it access to data sources within your network, right? So it's something to consider. Do we have any other questions? Who's hungry? I guess this is the end of the whole event. Done. Jeff, did you want to come up and say something?
Yes, I do.
Guys, folks, I just want to say one more thing. We are partnering with you. This is an opportunity for us to be able to hopefully, we're going to be around. I want to shake hands with all of you folks. I want to talk with everybody. This is an opportunity for us to work together. So please don't hesitate to come up. We'll be floating around in the back. We'll definitely stay for lunch because I hear it's sliced prime rib, right?
Yeah, sure.
But no, seriously, thank you so much for allowing us to be here. This is a fantastic opportunity, and thank all of you for what you do. Thank you.